May 31, 1921, 11:45 p.m., Greenwood Avenue, Tulsa, Oklahoma. O.W. Gurley stands on the third-floor balcony of his hotel, the finest black-owned hotel in America, watching the street below come alive with Friday night energy. The sound of jazz pours out of the Dreamland Theater. Laughter echoes from Williams' Confectionery, where families are finishing late dinners. Electric lights blaze across 35 city blocks. Ford Model Ts line the curbs. He counts the businesses he can see from where he stands. 2 banks, 21 restaurants, 30 grocery stores, 2 movie theaters, a library. His own hotel with 54 rooms, every one of them booked. He allows himself a moment of pride. 17 years ago, this was empty prairie. Now it's the richest black community in America. They call it Black Wall Street. Some call it the Negro Wall Street of the world. He prefers to think of it as proof that 40 years after slavery, his people could build empires. Proof that the lie of black inferiority was exactly that. A lie. Then he hears it. Church bells. Not the regular rhythm of calling people to prayer. The urgent clang of alarm. He looks south toward downtown Tulsa and sees something that makes his blood freeze. Fire. Not one fire. Dozens. Hundreds. Orange flames erupting across the southern edge of Greenwood, like a wave of hell itself rolling toward him. And above the flames, something he has never seen before in his life. Airplanes. Flying low over the neighborhood, dropping something. More flames explode where the objects fall. This is May 31st, 1921. The United States military has never bombed American citizens on American soil. Until tonight. By sunrise, 300 of the wealthiest black people in America will be dead or running for their lives. 35 blocks will be ash. Over 1,200 homes will be gone. $40 million in black wealth worth over $3 billion today will be stolen. And for the next 75 years, not a single Oklahoma textbook will mention it. Not one. 3 generations of children will grow up 30 miles from where it happened and never hear the name Black Wall Street. This is the story they buried. This is your stolen inheritance. And everything you were taught about why black families struggle financially is a lie built on this theft. Listen to me carefully, because what I'm about to tell you will change how you see everything. Your poverty, your family's struggle, the wealth gap, the excuses you've heard your whole life about why black people are behind economically. After this video, you will know the names of 7 black millionaires whose fortunes were burned to ash in a single night. You will understand how white Tulsa used military aircraft to bomb their own city. You will see why the government still refuses to pay reparations over 100 years later, even though they know exactly what they owe. And you will finally understand why your family might still be owed millions of dollars that were stolen from your ancestors while they slept. This is not ancient slavery history. This happened in 1921. Your great-grandparents' generation. Your great-great-grandparents might have lived through this. If your family came from Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana, or Kansas, this directly affected you. The wealth that was stolen from Greenwood, if it had been passed down through just 3 generations with normal investment returns, would be worth billions today. And it should belong to the descendants. It should belong to you. Your ancestors survived the Middle Passage. They survived 250 years of slavery. They survived Reconstruction terror. They built empires from absolutely nothing. And then white America burned those empires down because they could not stand to see black people wealthy. This is your history. This is your stolen money. This is your fight. Let me take you back to how Black Wall Street was even possible. The year is 1906. Tulsa, Oklahoma is an oil boom town. White prospectors are getting rich drilling for black gold. The city is growing fast. and a 40-year-old black man named O.W. Gurley sees an opportunity. Gurley was born in 1868 in Huntsville, Alabama. His parents had been enslaved. They gained their freedom when he was a baby, right at the end of the Civil War. He grew up poor, like most black families in the South, but he got an education, became a school teacher, then a postal worker. He saved every penny he could, moved to Perry, Oklahoma during the land run, sold his stake there and came to Tulsa in 1905 with $40 in his pocket and a vision in his mind. He looked at North Tulsa, an area most white people ignored, and he saw a possibility. In 1906, Gurley bought 40 acres of land for $1.25 per acre. $50 total. He had a plan that would change history. He would only sell and rent that land to black people. Create an all-black business district where every dollar spent would circulate within the black community. Keep the wealth in black hands. Some people thought he was crazy. Segregation was already the law. Why volunteer for it? But Gurley understood something profound. If black people were going to be separated anyway, they might as well control their own economy, build their own banks, own their own buildings, keep their own profits. He called it Greenwood, named after a town in Mississippi, and he started building. First came the Gurley Hotel. 3 stories, 54 rooms, the finest accommodations available to black travelers in all of Oklahoma. Then a grocery store. Then he started selling lots to other black entrepreneurs. Word spread fast. If you were a black business owner anywhere in the South and you wanted to build something without white interference, you came to Greenwood. If you were a black family tired of sharecropping and wanted to own land, you came to Greenwood. If you were a black professional, a doctor or lawyer or teacher who wanted to live with dignity, you came to Greenwood. And they came by the thousands. By 1921, just 15 years after Gurley bought that first 40 acres, Greenwood was a miracle. 10,000 black residents, over 600 businesses, all black owned. The community had everything. 2 newspapers, both black owned and operated. 13 churches, elegant homes with indoor plumbing and electricity luxuries most Americans, white or black, did not have. A school system that was actually funded and staffed by educated black teachers. 2 theaters showing the latest films. A public library. Luxury hotels. Fine restaurants. Clothing stores. Jewelry stores. 21 grocery stores and meat markets. 31 restaurants and chili parlors. Doctors' offices and dental practices. Law firms. A hospital. Even a bus system. And here is the number that made white Tulsa furious. Over 300 black families in Greenwood were millionaires. 300. In 1921 money. To put that in perspective, the median white household in America in 1921 had about $2,000 in assets. These black families in Greenwood had over $1 million each. The economic model was brilliant. A dollar that entered Greenwood would circulate 36 times before leaving the community. 36 times. You would earn money at your job. Spend it at a black-owned grocery store. That store owner would deposit it in a black-owned bank. The bank would loan it to a black entrepreneur starting a business. That entrepreneur would hire black workers who would spend their wages at black-owned restaurants, and on and on. In white neighborhoods across America, a dollar circulated maybe 3 or 4 times before leaving. In Greenwood, it circulated 36 times. This created generational wealth at a speed no one had ever seen before. Black families were buying land, building businesses, sending their children to college, investing in real estate, accumulating assets that could be passed down. This was not supposed to be possible. Black people were supposed to be poor, uneducated, dependent. That was the story white America told itself to justify slavery and segregation. And here was Greenwood, proving every single racist assumption wrong. Let me introduce you to the people who built this empire. Because their names deserve to be remembered, their stories deserve to be told. And their descendants deserve what was stolen. O.W. Gurley, the founder, was just the beginning. There was J.B. Stratford, John the Baptist Stratford. Born in 1861 in Kentucky to parents who had been enslaved, Stratford did not just survive, he thrived. Went to Oberlin College in Ohio, one of the few colleges that accepted black students, then to Indiana Law School. Became one of the very few black attorneys in America. He could have stayed in the North, where things were slightly less oppressive. Instead, he came to Tulsa in 1899, before Greenwood even existed, because he saw the same opportunity Gurley would see a few years later. Stratford built an empire. His crown jewel was the Stratford Hotel, 65 rooms, 3 stories, the largest black-owned hotel in Oklahoma, maybe in the entire country. It had a pool hall, a dining room that seated 80 people, meeting rooms for community gatherings. It was not just a hotel, it was the heart of Greenwood's social life. Stratford also owned 15 other properties in the district, rental homes, commercial buildings, a law office where he represented black clients who could never get fair treatment from white lawyers. He ran a loan business, helping other black families buy homes and start businesses. By 1921, J.B. Stratford was worth over $1 million. In today's money, that is over $16 million. One black man. 40 years after his parents were enslaved, there was A.J. Smitherman, Andrew Jackson Smitherman, born in 1883 in Childersburg, Alabama, another child of formerly enslaved parents. Smitherman became a lawyer, but his real power was his pen. In 1913, he founded the Tulsa Star, a black-owned newspaper that became the most influential black publication in Oklahoma. The paper had offices right on Greenwood Avenue, printed 5,000 copies every week. Smitherman used his newspaper to fight back against the racism that infected every corner of American life. He wrote editorials demanding equal treatment, calling out white violence, encouraging black self-defense. He published a line that would later be used against him. A Winchester rifle should have a place of honor in every black home. He meant it. He believed black people had the right to defend themselves, to protect their families, to shoot back if attacked. This made him dangerous in the eyes of white Tulsa. By 1921, Smitherman had built his newspaper into a business worth $150,000, over $2 million today. He had influence, he had a platform, he had the ear of the black community, and that made him a target. Then there was Dr. A.C. Jackson, Andrew Campbell Jackson, born in 1876 in Memphis, Tennessee. Went to Meharry Medical College, one of the premier black medical schools in the nation. Became a surgeon. And not just any surgeon. The Mayo Clinic, the most prestigious medical institution in America, called Dr. Jackson the most able Negro surgeon in America. White patients would travel to Tulsa specifically to be treated by him because his skill was that legendary. He had a private hospital in Greenwood, a beautiful 2-story home, a car which was still rare in 1921. By the time of the massacre, Dr. Jackson was worth about $250,000, but his real value was not measured in money. It was measured in lives saved, babies delivered, surgeries performed. He proved that a black man could reach the absolute pinnacle of a profession and be respected even by whites, until the night they shot him dead in front of his own home. And there were black women building empires too. Lula Williams, born in 1880 in Memphis, came to Tulsa and built something extraordinary, She owned Williams Confectionery, the largest candy and ice cream shop in Tulsa. Not the largest black-owned shop, the largest period. She owned the Williams Dreamland Theater, a 750-seat movie theater that showed the latest Hollywood films. She owned Williams Garage, the first black-owned automobile garage in Oklahoma. She owned a high-end restaurant, a boarding house. By 1921, Lula Williams had assets worth over $1 million, $16 million in today's money. She was the first black woman to own a movie theater in the United States. Think about that. A black woman in 1921, in Oklahoma, in the segregated South, owning a theater where both black and white customers came to watch films. She imported movies directly from Hollywood, paid the distribution fees, ran a business that competed with and beat white-owned theaters. She proved that black women could build empires just as well as any man. Simon Berry, the Jitney King, born in 1885 in Texas, came to Tulsa and saw that the city needed transportation. So he bought a Ford Model T, then another, then another. By 1921, Simon Berry owned a fleet of 12 cars, running as a taxi and charter bus service. He employed over 40 black drivers. His buses would take people to other cities across Oklahoma, Kansas, and Arkansas. Black families who could not ride on white-owned buses because of segregation could ride with Berry. He made transportation accessible and dignified. He was worth $500,000, and he created jobs, gave black men a way to earn a living wage, support their families. That mattered as much as his wealth. And there was Mabel Little, born in 1890 in Muskogee, Oklahoma. Mabel understood that black women had almost no access to quality beauty products or hair care. So she created it. She opened Little Rose Beauty Salon, then expanded to 3 locations across Tulsa, Oklahoma City, and Muskogee. She did not just style hair. She manufactured her own cosmetics, specifically designed for black women's skin and hair. She trained over 50 beauticians, teaching black women skills they could use to support themselves. Her salons became gathering places where black women could talk freely, organize, plan. Mabel Little was worth $300,000, but again, her value went beyond money. She created spaces where black women had power, had voice, had economic independence. That was revolutionary. These were not exceptions. These were not 1 or 2 lucky people. This was systematic wealth creation, a thriving economy, an entire community of educated, skilled, ambitious black people building generational wealth. And white Tulsa watched it happen with growing rage. Because Greenwood's existence destroyed every lie they had built their world on. Black people were not inferior. They were not lazy. They were not incapable of managing money or running businesses. Given even a sliver of opportunity, they built empires. And that truth was unacceptable. So they decided to erase it, burn it, massacre it, make sure it could never be pointed to as proof of what black people could achieve. What happened next was not a riot. It was not a spontaneous outbreak of violence. It was a planned, coordinated, systematic destruction of black wealth, and it was protected by every level of government. But before we get to the horror of what they did, you need to understand this was not isolated. Tulsa was not the only time. It was not even the first time. It was part of a pattern, a strategy, a systematic campaign to destroy black wealth every single time it appeared. Because if you think Tulsa was a tragic accident, a one-time explosion of racial hatred, you have been lied to. This was policy, and it happened over and over and over again across America for decades. Let me show you the pattern. Let me show you what they have been hiding from you your entire life. Wilmington, North Carolina, 1898, 23 years before Tulsa. Wilmington had the largest black community in North Carolina. Black people were 56% of the population. and they had political power. The mayor was black. 10 city council members were black. Black people owned businesses, published newspapers, ran schools. They were proving that Reconstruction could work, that black political power was not only possible, but successful. White supremacists could not allow that. On November 10, 1898, 2,000 armed white men attacked. They started with the Daily Record, the only black-owned newspaper in the state. Burned the building to the ground. Shot the editor, Alex Manley. Then they swept through the black neighborhoods, burning homes, shooting people in the streets, killing anyone who resisted. The exact death toll is still unknown. Official records said 14. Historians now estimate between 60 and 300 dead. But here is the key part. This was not a mob. This was organized, led by a former congressman named Alfred Waddell, supported by business leaders, coordinated with the Democratic Party. They called it the Wilmington Insurrection. Later they would call it the Wilmington Race Riot to make it sound like both sides were fighting. But it was neither. It was a coup. An overthrow of a democratically elected government, the only successful coup in American history. And they got away with it. After the massacre, 2,100 black residents were forced out of Wilmington at gunpoint, told never to return. Their property was seized. Their businesses were taken over by white owners. The black government was replaced with an all-white government. And for over 100 years, North Carolina textbooks taught that this was the restoration of good government. They taught children that white supremacy was restored to Wilmington and order was brought back. They made the massacre sound like a good thing. It was not until 2006, over a century later, that the state officially acknowledged this was a violent coup, a massacre, a theft. And even then, no reparations, no return of stolen property, just an acknowledgement. That is all. East St. Louis, Illinois, 1917, 4 years before Tulsa. East St. Louis was an industrial city, factories and warehouses. 10,000 black workers had migrated from the South looking for jobs. They found work in meatpacking plants, steel mills, railroads. They were making decent money, supporting families, building small homes. But white workers saw them as a threat. When labor unions went on strike, factory owners hired black workers as replacements. This created hatred. White workers blamed black workers instead of blaming the owners who were playing them against each other. On July 2, 1917, white mobs attacked black neighborhoods, pulled people out of their homes, beat them in the streets, set houses on fire and shot people as they ran out, threw black bodies into the rivers. The official death count was 39. Historians believe it was closer to 200. 6,000 black people lost their homes. Thousands more fled the city. Their property was looted or burned. No one was ever charged. The newspapers called it a race riot, as if black people started it, as if black people burned their own homes. The truth was, it was an economic attack. Destroy the black workers so white workers could have the jobs. And it worked. Elaine, Arkansas, 1919, 2 years before Tulsa. Elaine was farmland, cotton country. Black sharecroppers worked the fields trapped in debt to white landowners who cheated them on prices and interest rates. On September 30, 1919, a group of black farmers met at a church. They were forming a union, planning to demand fair prices for their cotton, fair treatment, the right to sell their crops on the open market instead of being forced to sell to the white landowners at whatever price the owners dictated. This was a threat. If black farmers organized, they might actually make money, build wealth, become independent. White power could not allow that. White police showed up at the church and opened fire. The farmers fired back in self-defense. One white officer was killed. That gave white Arkansas the excuse they needed. Over the next 3 days, between 500 and 1,000 white men, including federal troops, hunted black people across the county, shooting them in fields, dragging them from homes, murdering them on roads. Estimates of the dead range from 100 to 240. Most were buried in mass graves, no investigations, no records. After the massacre, 122 black farmers were arrested. 12 were sentenced to death for inciting a riot. Not one white person was charged. The NAACP fought for 4 years to get those death sentences overturned. They succeeded. But the message was clear. Organize and you die. Demand fair pay and you die. Try to build wealth and you die. Rosewood, Florida, 1923, 2 years after Tulsa. Rosewood was a small town, about 300 black residents. They owned land, owned homes, had a school, churches, a general store. It was quiet, peaceful. Then on January 1st, 1923, a white woman in a nearby town claimed a black man attacked her. It was a lie. She was covering up an affair. But the white mobs did not care about truth. They wanted blood. Over the next 7 days, white mobs from surrounding towns descended on Rosewood, burned every single building, every home, every church, the school, the store, everything. They shot residents as they fled into the swamps, hunted them like animals. Official records say 6 people died. Survivors said over 100. By January 7th, Rosewood did not exist anymore. Every building was ash. Every resident was gone, fled into the woods, or killed. The town vanished from maps. The land was taken over by white owners, and for 70 years, no one talked about it. It was completely erased. In 1993, a researcher uncovered survivor testimonies. Florida finally investigated. In 1994, the state paid $2.1 million to 9 survivors. 9 people. 2.1 million total for an entire town. That comes out to about $200,000 per person for losing everything, their homes, their land, their community, their family members. And that was considered generous. That was considered justice. Do you see the pattern now? Wilmington, 1898. East St. Louis, 1917. Elaine, 1919. Tulsa, 1921. Rosewood, 1923. And these are just the ones we know about. There were dozens more. Ocoee, Florida, 1920. Springfield, Illinois, 1908. Atlanta, 1906. New York, 1900. Everywhere black people built something, white mobs destroyed it. Every time black people accumulated wealth, it was stolen. Every time black people organized for rights, they were massacred. This was not random violence. This was systematic. This was economic terrorism. This was ethnic cleansing. And every single time, the same thing happened after. No one was charged. No one went to prison. The white mobs walked free. The black victims were blamed. The newspapers called it a riot. The history books either erased it completely or described it as a disturbance. And the stolen wealth was never returned. Not a penny. Not an acre of land. Nothing. The question you should be asking right now is, how did they get away with it? How did white mobs massacre hundreds of people, burn entire towns, steal millions of dollars in property, and face zero consequences? The answer is simple. The system protected them. At every level. Let me show you exactly how they made sure these crimes would never be punished. How they buried the evidence, rewrote the history, and made sure you would never know what was taken from your family. Physical destruction came first. Tulsa did not just burn buildings, they burned evidence. In 1922, 1 year after the massacre, the Tulsa County Clerk's office mysteriously caught fire. Every property deed for Greenwood was in that building. Every document proving who owned what land, what homes, what businesses. All of it burned. Gone. This was not an accident. When survivors tried to reclaim their property, they had no proof they ever owned it. No deed, no title, no documentation. The county said, "Sorry, we have no record of your ownership." You cannot prove this land was yours. So they took it, rezoned it, sold it to white developers, and the original black owners got nothing. The Tulsa Tribune, the white newspaper that helped start the massacre, did something even more brazen. On May 31st, 1901, the day the violence began, the Tribune published an article with the headline, "To Lynch Negro Tonight." That article created the white mob that gathered at the courthouse. It incited the violence that led to the massacre. After the massacre, the Tribune claimed that article never existed. They said people were misremembering. And then they destroyed every copy of the May 31st edition they could find, burned them, threw them away. Today, historians cannot find a single original copy of that edition. The Tribune erased their own role in inciting mass murder. Most of the photographs that exist of the Tulsa massacre were not taken by white newspapers. They were taken by black residents who hid their cameras and their film. White photographers were ordered to destroy any images of the destruction. Some did. Some secretly kept their negatives. That is the only reason we have any visual evidence at all. They tried to erase the pictures, erase the proof, make it so no one could ever see what they did, and they killed witnesses. Dr. A.C. Jackson, the surgeon I told you about, tried to surrender peacefully. He walked out of his home with his hands up, unarmed. He thought if he cooperated, they would spare him. A white police officer shot him dead on his front lawn, left his body there for 3 hours. Why kill a doctor who was surrendering? Because Dr. Jackson was too successful, too respected. His existence proved black excellence was real, so they executed him. Many other community leaders disappeared during those 2 days. Men who organized, men who spoke out, men who led. They were shot and buried in mass graves. Some bodies were thrown in the Arkansas River. Some were buried under roads and buildings that were constructed right after the massacre. In 2020, almost 100 years later, archaeologists found mass graves in Tulsa using ground-penetrating radar. Dozens of bodies, maybe hundreds, buried without names, without markers, without records. The city knew they were there. They built over them anyway. Then came the legal suppression, the laws designed to make sure black people could never rebuild what was destroyed. On June 2, 1921, the day after the massacre, the Tulsa City Commission held an emergency meeting. They passed a new fire ordinance, Ordinance number 2156. It required that any building in the fire zone, which included all of Greenwood, had to be rebuilt with fireproof materials. Brick, concrete, steel, no wood allowed. Sounds reasonable, right? Except it was not about fire safety. It was about economics. Building with brick and concrete cost 3 times more than building with wood. Most black families who lost their homes did not have insurance money. They barely had savings. The only way they could afford to rebuild was with wood, the same way they built before. The new law made that illegal. It priced them out, forced them to either sell their land cheap to white developers or abandon it entirely. That was the point. Drive black people out, take the land. And it worked. The city also changed the zoning laws. Before the massacre, Greenwood was zoned residential. People could live there. After the massacre, the city rezoned large sections as commercial or industrial. You cannot build homes in a commercial zone. Black families who owned land suddenly could not rebuild homes on their own property. They had to sell. And who bought white real estate speculators, white businessmen? They got Greenwood land for pennies on the dollar. Then they either left it empty or developed it for profit. Either way, the black families who built Greenwood were gone, erased, replaced. The courts were just as corrupt. In the months after the massacre, multiple black survivors tried to sue. They sued the city of Tulsa for failing to protect them. They sued insurance companies for refusing to pay claims. They sued white individuals who stole their property. Every single case was dismissed or ruled against them. Every one. The courts said the city had no duty to protect black residents. The courts said insurance policies did not cover riot damage, and the massacre was legally defined as a riot, not an attack. The court said there was no evidence of theft because all the property records had burned. It was a perfect trap. Destroy the evidence, then claim there is no evidence. Deny insurance claims, then claim people have no money to rebuild. Change the laws, then claim people are breaking the law if they try to return. The system made recovery legally impossible. J.B. Stratford, the hotel owner, tried to fight back in court. He filed lawsuits against the city and against his insurance company. He lost both. Then the state of Oklahoma issued a warrant for his arrest. The charge was inciting a riot, because he and other black men had armed themselves and defended their neighborhood. Self-defense was called a crime. Stratford had to flee to Chicago. He never returned to Tulsa. If he had, he would have been arrested and possibly lynched. He lost his hotel, his properties, his $1 million fortune, and he was labeled a criminal for trying to protect his community. He died in exile. His children never received a cent of his wealth. The state of Oklahoma did not drop the charges against Stratford until 1996, 75 years after the massacre, 3 years after he died. They finally admitted he committed no crime, but they never returned his property, never compensated his family, just said oops, our bad, and moved on. Insurance companies made billions off policies sold to black families in Greenwood. When those families tried to collect after losing everything, every major insurance company denied the claims. They used something called the Riot Exclusion Clause. If damage occurred during a riot, it was not covered. The insurance industry classified the Tulsa massacre as a riot, not an attack, not terrorism, a riot, which meant black policyholders got nothing. Estimates say insurance companies should have paid out over $200 million in 1921 money. That is about $3 billion today. Not $1 was paid, not to a single family. The insurance industry kept the premiums black families had been paying for years and refused to honor the policies. It was theft, legal theft, protected by contracts and courts and laws that were designed to rob black people and get away with it. But the most insidious suppression happened in schools, in textbooks, in the education system. Because if you can control what children learn, you control what they believe as adults. And what they taught about Tulsa for 75 years was nothing. Absolutely nothing. From 1921 to 1996, not a single Oklahoma history textbook mentioned the Tulsa Race Massacre. Not one. 3 generations of students in Oklahoma, including students who lived in Tulsa, went through 12 years of school and never heard the words Black Wall Street. Teachers were not told. Curriculum did not include it. It was completely erased. Children grew up 30 miles from where the massacre happened and did not know their city had bombed its own people. How is that possible? Because the people who controlled education made a choice. They chose to bury it, hide it, pretend it never happened. And it was not just Oklahoma. National history textbooks ignored it too. The major publishers, the ones used in schools across America, did not mention Tulsa. If they mentioned racial violence at all, it was vague. They would say things like tensions between races sometimes led to violence in the early 1900s. Passive voice, no specifics, no names, no accountability. They did not say white mobs massacred black communities. They did not say the government supported it. They said tensions led to violence, as if both sides were equally responsible, as if black people burned their own homes. That is called gaslighting, rewriting history to make the victims look guilty and the perpetrators look innocent. And it worked. Most Americans even today have never heard of the Tulsa Race Massacre. They have never heard of Rosewood or Wilmington or Elaine. They think racial violence was just the Ku Klux Klan. They do not know it was systematic, economic, supported by law enforcement and government. Even the language was changed. They did not call it the Tulsa Race Massacre. They called it the Tulsa Race Riot. That word riot is everything. A riot implies chaos, spontaneous violence, both sides fighting. A massacre implies one-sided slaughter, organized killing, innocents murdered. For 80 years it was officially called the Tulsa Race Riot. That language shaped how people understood it. If it was a riot, then maybe black people were partly to blame. Maybe they fought back too hard. Maybe it got out of hand. But if it was a massacre, then it was murder, theft, genocide. It was not until 2018, 97 years later, that the Oklahoma legislature officially renamed it the Tulsa Race Massacre. 97 years to get the words right. And even now, many people still call it a riot because that is what they were taught. The lie is sticky. It stays in people's minds even after the truth comes out. Teachers who did know about the massacre were often afraid to teach it. Afraid of backlash from white parents, afraid of being called divisive or political, afraid of losing their jobs. So even when the information became available in the 1990s and 2000s, many teachers skipped it, avoided it, did not want the controversy, which meant another generation of students did not learn, did not know, grew up ignorant of their own state's history, and that ignorance served a purpose. If people do not know what happened, they cannot demand justice. They cannot ask for reparations. They cannot hold anyone accountable. Ignorance protects the guilty. Education threatens them. That is why they fought so hard to keep this story buried. The media played their role too. White newspapers in Tulsa in 1921 did not just ignore the massacre, they actively lied about it. The Tulsa Tribune, the paper that published the lynch mob article, later claimed black people started the violence. They said armed Negroes attacked white citizens. They said the white mob was acting in self-defense. They published editorials praising the white rioters for restoring order. They called the destruction of Greenwood a necessary response to black aggression. This was propaganda, state-sponsored lies printed as news. And people believed it because it was in the newspaper. It had to be true, right, wrong. It was a coordinated effort to shift blame, make the victims look like criminals, make the criminals look like heroes. The Tulsa World, another white newspaper, did the same thing. Their headlines said, "Negros incite race riot." Not white mob attacks black neighborhood. Not police fail to protect citizens. Negroes incite riot, putting blame on the victims. And these newspapers did not just lie in 1921. They kept lying. For decades, when journalists would try to investigate the massacre, the Tribune and the World would downplay it. They would say it was exaggerated, not that bad. Both sides suffered. They used their power to control the narrative, control what people believed. And because they were the official record historians in other states who wanted to write about Tulsa, had to rely on these newspapers. So the lies spread, became part of the historical record, got repeated in books and documentaries and museums. It was not until the 1990s that historians started finding survivor testimonies, interviews with people who lived through it, letters they wrote, diaries they kept. These first-hand accounts contradicted everything the white newspapers said. Survivors described airplanes dropping firebombs. They described white police officers shooting unarmed black people. They described being rounded up and held in camps. They described watching their homes burn while firefighters stood by and did nothing. These were not riots. These were war crimes. But for 70 years, no one with power listened to the survivors. They were dismissed as biased, as emotional, as unreliable. The white newspapers were considered objective. The black survivors were considered subjective. Even though the white newspapers were literally run by the people who supported the massacre. Even though the survivors had nothing to gain by lying and everything to lose. The timeline of silence is stunning. 1921, the massacre happens. 1921 to 1971, 50 years of absolute silence. Not a single official investigation, not a single memorial, not a single public acknowledgement. 1971, a white historian named Ed Wheeler publishes the first academic paper about the massacre in the Tulsa Historical Society magazine. It is largely ignored. 1996, 75 years after the massacre, the state of Oklahoma finally creates a commission to investigate. They interview survivors. Most are in their 90s and hundreds. They dig through archives. They confirm everything the survivors said was true. 2001, the commission releases its final report. They recommend reparations. The Oklahoma legislature refuses. They say it is too expensive, too complicated, too long ago. 2020, the HBO series Watchmen features the Tulsa massacre in its first episode. Suddenly, millions of people who never heard of it are Googling Black Wall Street. Finally, the story starts to break through. 2021, the 100th anniversary. National media covers it. President Biden visits Tulsa, gives a speech, but still no reparations, still no return property. Just acknowledgement. Just sorry this happened. And that is supposed to be enough. It is not enough. Acknowledgement without restitution is just words. They can say sorry. They can build memorials. They can rename it a massacre instead of a riot. But until they pay back what was stolen, it is empty, and they know exactly what they owe. Researchers have calculated it. In 1921, the estimated property damage in Greenwood was between $20 million and $200 million, depending on whose numbers you use. Let us use a conservative estimate. $50 million in 1921 money. Adjusted for inflation, that is about $800 million today. But that is just property. That does not include lost wages, lost business income, lost generational wealth. If you calculate what those 300 millionaire families would have passed down to their children and grandchildren, if you calculate compound interest over 100 years, the number is in the billions. Some economists estimate over $100 billion in stolen generational wealth from Tulsa alone. And that is just Tulsa. Add in Wilmington, Rosewood, Elaine, and the dozens of other massacres. Add in redlining and urban renewal. Add in 400 years of stolen labor during slavery. The total comes to trillions. Trillions of dollars that were taken from Black Americans and never returned. They say reparations are impossible, too expensive. How do you calculate it? How do you decide who gets paid? But they calculated it just fine when it came to paying slave owners. After the Civil War, the federal government did not pay reparations to the people who were enslaved. They paid reparations to the slave owners, compensated them for their lost property. Yes, enslaved people were considered property. And the government paid white slave owners for losing that property. They figured out how to calculate it then. They can figure it out now. They say we cannot afford reparations. But we just spend trillions on wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Trillions on bank bailouts in 2008. Trillions on COVID relief. When it is for banks or oil companies or defense contractors, money is no object. When it is for Black Americans who were systematically robbed, suddenly the government is broke. Suddenly it is too complicated. Suddenly we need to move forward and not dwell on the past. But the past is not past. The theft is ongoing. Let me connect the dots for you. Let me show you how Tulsa in 1921 created the problems you see today in 2024. This is not ancient history. This is right now. The median white household in America today has a net worth of about $188,000. The median black household has a net worth of about $24,000. That is an 8-to-1 ratio, 8 times more wealth. People love to explain that gap with cultural explanations. They say black people do not save enough, do not invest enough, do not value education enough. All lies. The wealth gap exists because white America systematically destroyed black wealth every time it appeared. And Tulsa is the proof. Think about it this way. If the Tulsa massacre had not happened, if those 300 millionaire families had kept their wealth, where would their descendants be today? Let us do the math. Let us say the average Greenwood millionaire family had $500,000 in assets in 1921. That is a conservative estimate. Many had more. If that money had been invested conservatively, earning an average of 6% return per year, do you know what it would be worth today? Over $200 million per family. 200 million. Now multiply that by 300 families. That is $60 billion. $60 billion that should be in the hands of black families right now. But it is not. It was stolen, burned, never repaid. Those families had to start over from zero. Most of them stayed poor, passed down poverty instead of wealth. And that poverty affects their great-grandchildren today. You today. This is why your family rents instead of owns. This is why you do not have a trust fund. This is why you do not have generational wealth to fall back on. Not because your ancestors were lazy, not because they did not work hard, but because every time they built something, it was taken. And this keeps happening. The methods changed, but the theft continued. In the 1930s and 1940s, the federal government created a program called redlining. The Federal Housing Administration would draw maps of American cities. They would color code neighborhoods. Green meant safe to invest in. Red meant too risky. And guess which neighborhoods were always colored red-black neighborhoods? Even wealthy black neighborhoods. Even places where black families owned their homes and had good jobs. Redlining meant banks would not give mortgages to black families, would not give business loans, would not invest. This locked black families out of the biggest wealth-building opportunity in American history. The post-World War II housing boom. White families could buy homes with FHA loans, low interest, low down payment. They bought houses in the suburbs for $15,000. Those houses are worth $500,000 today. That equity, that increase in value, created the white middle class, allowed white families to send kids to college, start businesses, retire comfortably. Black families were denied those loans, forced to rent, or forced to buy in redlined neighborhoods where property values stayed low. They could not build equity, could not pass wealth to their kids. The racial wealth gap today is a direct result of redlining. And redlining was legal until 1968. Your parents lived through this. Your grandparents definitely lived through it. This is not ancient history. Then came urban renewal in the 1950s and 60s. Cities decided to modernize, build highways, create business districts. And where did they build those highways? Right through black neighborhoods. They called it slum clearance, said they were getting rid of blight. But the neighborhoods they destroyed were not slums. They were thriving black communities, places like Greenwood, places where black families owned homes and businesses. The federal government used eminent domain to seize the land, paid far below market value, tore down entire neighborhoods, displaced hundreds of thousands of black families, And where did those families go? Into public housing projects, into poverty. They lost their homes, their businesses, their wealth. Again. This happened in almost every major American city: Boston, Detroit, Los Angeles, Miami, Atlanta, everywhere. They built highways and convention centers and sports stadiums on top of what used to be Black Wall Streets. And the families who lost everything got pennies in compensation, if they got anything at all. Then, the war on drugs, started in 1971 by President Richard Nixon, exploded in the 1980s under President Ronald Reagan. They flooded black neighborhoods with crack cocaine. Yes, the CIA has admitted to being involved in drug trafficking that brought cocaine into black communities. Then, they criminalized it, made the penalties for crack, which was used mostly by black people, 100 times harsher than the penalties for powder cocaine, which was used mostly by white people. Same drug, different form, wildly different sentences. A black man caught with 5 grams of crack got 5 years in prison. A white man caught with 500 grams of powder cocaine got the same sentence. That was the law, by design. The result was mass incarceration, millions of black men in prison, families destroyed, fathers taken away, communities destabilized. And here is the kicker. The 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, has an exception. Slavery is legal as punishment for a crime. So prisons use incarcerated people as free labor. Pay them pennies an hour, rent them out to corporations. It is slavery, with a different name, and it targets black people specifically. 1 in 3 black men will be incarcerated in their lifetime. 1 in 3. That is not because black people commit more crimes. Studies show white people and black people use drugs at the same rates. But black people are arrested more, charged more harshly, sentenced longer. The system is designed to feed black bodies into prisons, just like it was designed to destroy black wealth in Tulsa. Gentrification is the modern version of the Tulsa massacre. Different method, same result. Here is how it works. A black neighborhood has been neglected for decades. Underfunded schools, no grocery stores, high crime because there are no jobs. Then white developers notice the neighborhood is close to downtown. Good location, cheap property. They start buying buildings, renovating them, opening coffee shops and yoga studios, raising rents. Property taxes go up. Long-time black residents can no longer afford to live there. They are forced out, displaced. Where do they go? Further out, to cheaper areas, away from their community, away from their churches, away from their families. And who moves into the newly renovated neighborhood? Young white professionals. They get to live in the cool urban neighborhood that used to be black, and they congratulate themselves for living in a diverse area. Except they displaced the diversity. They are the reason the black families are gone. This is happening right now in every major city: Harlem, Brooklyn, Oakland, Atlanta, Houston, Chicago. Black neighborhoods that survived everything else are being taken over by gentrification. And the wealth that comes from rising property values, it goes to white landlords and developers, not to the black families who lived there for generations. Even Greenwood, the site of the Tulsa massacre, is being gentrified. Today, the Greenwood district is trendy, expensive, full of white-owned businesses. There is a boutique hotel where the Stratford Hotel used to stand, a fancy restaurant where Williams Confectionery used to be, condos selling for $500,000 on land that used to be owned by black families. And where are the descendants of those families? Most of them cannot afford to live there. They were priced out. Again, they survived the massacre, survived 75 years of poverty because they never got reparations. And now they are being pushed out by high rents and property taxes. It is Tulsa 1921 all over again. Just slower, quieter, legal. But the result is the same. Black people lose the land. White people profit. So when they ask why black families are poor, this is why. When they ask why there is a wealth gap, this is why. When they ask why black neighborhoods struggle, this is why. It is not culture. It is not values. It is not lack of effort. It is systematic theft over and over and over for 100 years. Tulsa, redlining, urban renewal, mass incarceration, gentrification. Every generation they find a new way to take what black people build. And then they have the audacity to ask why black people do not have wealth. You know why? Because they stole it. They are still stealing it, and they refuse to pay it back. If this truth hit you, if this made you angry, I need you to do something right now. Comment the word truth below. Just that word, truth. Let the algorithm know this matters. Let YouTube know people care about this history. Because platforms like this try to suppress videos like this. They do not want this information spreading. They call it divisive. They call it controversial. But truth is not divisive. Lies are divisive. And we have been fed lies our entire lives. Hit that like button if you are tired of the lies. If you are ready to know the real history. If you are done with the sanitized version they taught in school. And share this video with 5 people. I am serious. 5 people who need to know this. Your parents, your children, your friends, your church members. Someone in your family needs to hear this story. Someone does not know about Tulsa. Someone thinks the wealth gap is black people's fault. Send them this video. Change their mind. Because every person who learns the truth is one more person who can demand justice. One more person who can fight for reparations. One more person who can pass this knowledge to the next generation. Do not let them erase us again. You are the keeper of this truth now. But we are not done. Because I need you to understand something. This story is not just about what they took from you. It is about who you are. It is about what is in your blood. Your DNA, your heritage. And once you understand that everything changes, everything.